In the winter of 1944, the war in the Pacific had reached a critical juncture. The United States Navy, stretched across thousands of miles of ocean, faced a relentless and cunning enemy. Japanese submarines prowled beneath the waves from New Guinea to the Gilberts, preying on Allied convoys and cutting off supply routes. Amid this chaos, an unmarked order arrived at Tulagi Naval Base, a directive so secret that it bypassed even local command channels. It was the birth of a mission that would vanish from official records for decades: the classified patrol of the USS Grey Dawn. The Grey Dawn was no grand warship. She was a 110-foot patrol craft, designated PC-1219, built for speed and stealth. Her crew of 12 men, most in their early 20s, were veterans of island-hopping operations in the Solomons. They were led by Lieutenant Commander Frank H. Delaney, a quiet officer from Maine known for his precision and calm under pressure. Delaney had earned a Bronze Star for rescuing downed aviators off Guadalcanal, but what set him apart was his reputation for obeying orders without question, even when those orders made little sense. In early February, the Grey Dawn was pulled from routine convoy duty and reassigned under Task Unit 16.9.2, a designation absent from most Navy rosters. Their mission: long-range reconnaissance and intelligence verification along the Bougainville approach. It was the kind of phrasing used when the Navy didn't want to admit what it was actually doing. The crew were told to prepare for an extended patrol, to expect no communication for at least 10 days, and to maintain absolute radio silence unless under attack. The Solomon Islands chain, where this story unfolds, was a treacherous arena, a labyrinth of reefs, dense jungle coastlines, and unpredictable weather. The Japanese had retreated northward but still controlled outposts on Bougainville and Choiseul. Allied forces had pushed hard to cut their supply lines, but rumors persisted of a secret fuel route supplying isolated Japanese garrisons. It was this phantom convoy, as one intelligence memo called it, that the Grey Dawn was likely sent to locate. On February 16, 1944, under a blood-orange sunset, the Grey Dawn slipped away from Tulagi Harbor. The few who saw her departure assumed it was just another coastal sweep. The patrol boat carried extra rations, long-range fuel tanks, and a set of newly issued top-secret cipher sheets. According to the engineering log, their first waypoint was south of New Georgia, a staging point before heading into deeper, less charted waters. The tension aboard was palpable. Sailors' diaries later recovered from shore leave before departure hinted that none of them knew where they were going. Radioman Second Class Edward Eddie Klein wrote in his final letter home, "They've got us running quiet. No lights, no chatter, no clue. Feels like we're hunting ghosts out here." His words would later become an eerie echo of the patrol's fate. 2 days into the mission, the Grey Dawn sent a short encrypted message to Base Command at Tulagi. The contents were routine: position holding. No enemy sighted. Continuing course northward. The message was received at 2100 hours on February 18th, then abruptly, silence. No distress call. No radar ping. No acknowledgement to repeated hails. The patrol boat simply vanished somewhere in the dark Pacific. When the Navy's monitoring stations in Espiritu Santo failed to receive the expected position update 24 hours later, the command grew uneasy. Still, wartime protocol demanded patience. Radios failed often in the tropics, and storms could easily knock out transmission equipment. But as days turned into a week, the realization sank in: something had gone terribly wrong. What makes this story stand apart from countless wartime disappearances is the secrecy that followed. The Grey Dawn's mission was never publicly logged in the South Pacific War Diary. Even after the war, when thousands of reports were declassified, her patrol records remained missing. Only through later released communications from Commander Task Force 16 did researchers confirm her assignment: a reconnaissance mission into waters suspected of concealing enemy tanker routes. Was the Grey Dawn sunk by a Japanese submarine? Caught in a violent squall? Or was she silenced for something far more secret, perhaps an encounter the Navy chose to bury? The answers lay buried in classified archives, sealed under the justification of national security. As the sun set over the Solomons on February 20th, search vessels began scouring the area in widening circles. But no trace, no oil slick, no debris field, surfaced. The Pacific had swallowed her whole. The disappearance of the USS Grey Dawn would become one of the most perplexing, unsolved naval cases of the Pacific War. Her name was struck from the active rolls with little ceremony, and families were told only that their sons were lost in action. Yet whispers among veterans suggested otherwise, that the Navy knew more than it ever admitted. And so began the legend of the secret patrol that never reported back, a mission buried under waves, silence, and secrecy that would haunt naval history for decades. At dawn on February 18, 1944, the Pacific lay deceptively calm. The USS Grey Dawn was making steady headway northwest of New Georgia, moving through mist-covered waters under strict radio silence. Her engines droned at a steady pace, 12 knots, while the crew maintained a tense but routine watch. They had no idea this would be their final verified position. That morning, the ship transmitted its last known message, a simple situation report stating, "No enemy sighted. Continuing course northward." Nothing in that message hinted at distress or danger. Within 24 hours, the Grey Dawn would vanish without a trace. The Solomons were unforgiving waters, especially for small patrol craft. Uncharted reefs, shifting currents, and sudden squalls had claimed dozens of vessels on both sides of the war. But Lieutenant Commander Delaney was no novice. Naval records show he'd navigated these routes multiple times, escorting transports and patrolling coastal inlets during the Guadalcanal campaign. His seamanship was widely respected. "Delaney doesn't take chances," one of his former crewmen recalled in an oral history decades later. "If he went missing, something happened that was out of his control." The official record shows that the Grey Dawn's last signal was logged at 2,100 hours. Subsequent attempts to establish contact went unanswered. The following day, a tropical depression rolled through the northern Solomon Sea, bringing 40-knot winds and torrential rain. At first, command believed the storm might have forced radio silence, a reasonable explanation. Yet by February 20th, the weather had cleared, and still, no word came. By February 21st, the Navy dispatched 2 PBY Catalina flying boats from Henderson Field on Guadalcanal to begin aerial sweeps. Their reconnaissance routes crisscrossed the intended patrol sector between Bougainville and Columbangara. For 3 days, they searched open ocean and reef passages, spotting only floating vegetation and scattered fuel drums, none confirmed as belonging to the missing ship. The pilots later reported something curious: unusual sonar pings detected by nearby destroyers during the search, possibly from a submerged submarine. No enemy subs were confirmed in the region at that time, but post-war Japanese records indicate that RO-105, a mid-range Type K-6 submarine, was operating in those waters that same week. Meanwhile, on Tulagi, Base Communications Officer Lieutenant Mark Willoughby noted something strange in his daily log: Task Unit 16.9.2 no longer responding. Search order issued via non-standard channel. No public record entry authorized. That final sentence, "no public record entry authorized," hinted at something far deeper than a mere disappearance. The Navy was deliberately keeping the mission off the books. In the following days, search efforts intensified. The destroyer USS Fraser and the patrol craft PC-1221 scoured the region using sonar and depth sounding gear, hoping for echoes of a wreck. Nothing. Local islanders on Choiseul reported seeing a small warship burning on the horizon around the 18th or 19th, but no wreckage was found to corroborate the claim. A classified dispatch from Commander, South Pacific Force, dated March 3, 1944, concluded the vessel was presumed lost due to enemy action or operational failure. And yet, operational failure didn't fit. The Grey Dawn had an experienced crew, solid navigation records, and calm seas for most of its route. The lack of debris was even more perplexing. Wartime losses at sea almost always left some trace: oil slicks, life rafts, floating wreckage. Here, there was nothing. The ocean was silent, as if the patrol had simply been erased. Years later, researchers found small discrepancies in radio logs that deepened the mystery. A coded message received at Espiritu Santo at 2,300 hours on February 18 referenced a detected signal bearing east from a source that could have been the Grey Dawn. But no response or follow-up was recorded. Did the ship attempt to break silence when it sighted something, perhaps the rumored Japanese fuel convoy? If so, the message never reached its destination intact. For the families back home, the Navy's telegrams were cold and incomplete. "Missing in action, presumed lost," read the notice sent to Delaney's wife in Maine. No details, no comfort, just absence. Some of the crew's parents wrote directly to the Navy Department, asking for clarification. They received polite but generic replies. Due to the classified nature of operations in the South Pacific, certain details cannot be disclosed at this time. It was the standard bureaucratic curtain that fell over every secret mission gone wrong. The disappearance quickly faded from the wartime press. No official announcement, no listing in public casualty reports. The Gray Dawn became just another line in the Navy's restricted files. But among Pacific veterans, her story spread like a rumor. Some claimed she was sunk while shadowing an enemy convoy. Others whispered of friendly fire, that she was mistaken for a Japanese craft in the chaos of night. One old chief petty officer recalled hearing a frantic SOS fragment, "Mayday, Gray," on an open frequency days after the ship vanished. Officially, that signal was never confirmed. What truly happened that night in February remains hidden beneath layers of time and classification. Was the Gray Dawn ambushed, sabotaged, or lost to something no record dared mention? Whatever the cause, her silence marked the beginning of one of the Pacific War's most enduring enigmas, a patrol that vanished without a trace, leaving only questions in its wake. By the end of that month, Task Unit 16.9.2 was quietly dissolved. All related mission documents were marked restricted and filed under Operations Intelligence. It would take years, and the persistence of wartime historians, for the mystery of the secret patrol that never reported back to re-emerge from the depths. By late February 1944, word of the USS Gray Dawn's disappearance began to ripple quietly through the ranks of the South Pacific Fleet. On paper, the mission still existed. In reality, command officers at Tulagi already knew the grim truth: the patrol boat was gone. Yet official action was delayed for nearly 2 days, an eternity in the unforgiving Pacific. When the first search orders were finally issued, they carried a peculiar classification: Level 3 restricted, limited distribution. Only 3 officers in the region were authorized to view them. Search operations began on February 21st. The Navy dispatched a pair of PBY Catalina aircraft from Guadalcanal, alongside the destroyers USS Fraser and USS Waller, to comb the waters between Bougainville and New Georgia. The weather had cleared. Visibility was excellent. But the sea gave nothing back. No oil slick, no debris, no bodies, just the vast, indifferent expanse of blue stretching to the horizon. "We saw everything and nothing," one Catalina crewman later wrote. The ocean was calm, almost too calm, like it was hiding something. At this stage of the war, the U.S. Navy had improved its search and rescue protocols dramatically. Radar sweeps, sonar drags, and radio triangulation could usually locate downed aircraft or wrecked vessels within days. That none of these methods yielded results for the Gray Dawn was extraordinary. Then, something even stranger occurred. During the second day of search, the destroyer USS Waller reported faint sonar contacts, irregular metallic echoes, stationary, and at a depth of 180 feet near the Blackett Strait. When divers attempted to investigate, they found nothing. The contact had vanished. Meanwhile, in the communication records recovered years later, a peculiar entry appeared in the logs of naval intelligence at Noumea, a report of enemy traffic intercepts, possibly referencing a lost American craft. The Japanese submarine RO-105 had transmitted a message around that time describing a small American patrol vessel, unidentified, spotted burning near the Choiseul coast. The intercept was never verified, but the phrasing raised eyebrows. It matched the unconfirmed islander sightings reported earlier, a small warship burning on the horizon. However, when researchers later accessed declassified Japanese naval archives, they discovered no confirmed kill corresponding to that description. The Imperial Navy's records for February 1944 listed no engagements with American vessels in the Solomon sector. So, if the Japanese didn't sink the Gray Dawn, what did? One theory emerged from the shadows of naval bureaucracy: sabotage or secrecy. Several surviving crewmen from nearby patrol units recalled a rumor circulating at Tulagi in March 1944. They said the Grey Dawn was on something big, one recalled in a 1972 interview. Bigger than convoy scouting, something the brass wanted buried. It was whispered that Delaney's mission involved more than reconnaissance, possibly tracking a covert enemy refueling line or even shadowing a captured vessel repurposed for Allied intelligence work. If true, such missions would explain the extreme secrecy that followed. Even among the searchers, tension grew. Crews of the Fraser and the Waller were instructed not to log certain coordinates or share findings verbally over unsecured channels. After 10 fruitless days, the official search was called off. But internally, messages between naval commands show continued interest in the case. A decrypted cable from Comsopac, Commander, South Pacific Area, dated March 9 read, "Cease physical search. Continue SIGINT monitoring for any related transmissions. Maintain discretion." As weeks turned into months, the absence of answers gnawed at those who had known the men aboard. In a rare act of defiance, a yeoman second class attached to Tulagi Base copied portions of the Grey Dawn's last movement orders before they were sealed in classified archives. The note was later found among his personal effects. It read, in part, TU 16.9.2 Assigned Objective: Monitor unregistered transport activity west of Bougainville. Suspect enemy logistic resupply. This fragment confirmed that the mission had indeed targeted secret Japanese shipping. But what the patrol found, or who found them, remains a blank page in the official record. The emotional toll extended far beyond the paperwork. Families received formal telegrams but no explanations. Lieutenant Commander Delaney's wife, Eleanor, wrote multiple letters to the Navy Department, pleading for details. Her last one, dated August 1944, read, "It is not knowing that makes it impossible. If his ship was lost in action, let it be said so plainly. If there is more, I deserve to hear it." She never received a reply beyond the standard condolence letter. In the decades that followed, naval historians pieced together fragments from declassified files. Among them was a field report from an Australian coastwatcher stationed on New Georgia, noting the sound of distant gunfire on the night of February 18, 1944, roughly the same time the Grey Dawn went silent. No Japanese ships were logged nearby, and no Allied vessel was reported engaged. The report was quietly archived and forgotten. Every piece of evidence seemed to contradict the next. There was no wreck, no confirmed battle, no survivor testimony. Just silence, and the lingering suspicion that someone had chosen it that way. When the war ended, the official Navy record reduced the incident to a single, sterile line: USS PC 1219, missing, presumed lost due to unknown operational causes. But sailors who served in those waters knew better. The Solomons had their secrets, and the ocean had its graves. The Grey Dawn had joined both. And yet, years later, declassified intelligence would hint that her final patrol might have been far from routine, that her orders reached higher than anyone imagined, and that her disappearance was only the beginning of a deeper mystery. By the time the war ended in 1945, the loss of the USS Grey Dawn had quietly disappeared into the background noise of victory. The Pacific was littered with wrecks and unmarked graves. Missing ships were not uncommon. Yet something about the Grey Dawn didn't fit the pattern. The patrol had vanished under clear skies, in calm seas, on a mission whose true purpose had never been recorded. For most, the story ended with the Navy's terse classification: missing, presumed lost. But in the years that followed, fragments of truth began to resurface. Fragments that suggested the patrol's disappearance was anything but random. In 1950, the U.S. Navy began a routine archival review of classified South Pacific operations for declassification. Among the reviewed documents was a set of redacted communiques related to Task Unit 16.9.2. Most were routine operational memos. But one file, labeled Confidential, Restricted Access, contained an after-action analysis that referred cryptically to intercepted transmissions regarding a high-value maritime target near Bougainville. The report theorized that the Grey Dawn's mission was connected to intelligence gathered by Allied codebreakers in January 1944, specifically, decrypts from the Japanese Maru convoy codes. These indicated the existence of a fuel transport route hidden among civilian shipping lanes, supplying isolated Japanese garrisons throughout the Solomon Sea. If the Grey Dawn's orders were to confirm that convoy's location, she may have ventured farther north than anyone realized, into waters not yet cleared of enemy patrols. The official charts of her patrol zone, released decades later, include a large section of unmarked sea labeled only as Area Unconfirmed. Historians have speculated that this was an intentional omission. The post-war intelligence review also uncovered an intriguing note written by a junior officer in naval intelligence, Lieutenant Harold Vance, dated April 1944, recommends suppression of Tu-16.9.2 records until fuel convoy intelligence confirmed through alternate means. Suppression, not destruction. The choice of words implied the Grey Dawn's mission had intersected with something ongoing, something that required continued secrecy. But the mystery deepened further in 1951 when a discovery was made by local fishermen near Kolumbangara Island. Rusted metal fragments, encrusted with coral, were dragged up in their nets. When examined by Royal New Zealand Navy divers, the fragments bore faintly visible serial markings, PC 1219. It was the Grey Dawn's hull number. The location of the find, however, was troubling, nearly 80 miles west of her assigned patrol route. What was she doing there? The recovered metal showed signs of controlled detonation from the inside, not impact, not torpedo damage. Naval engineers concluded that the fragments appeared to have come from deliberate scuttling charges. The report, filed under accidental loss, confirmed, suggested that the vessel had been intentionally sunk. No human remains were found. No weapons. Just a few rusted fragments, a mystery deepened rather than solved. For many, this evidence seemed to confirm what some officers had whispered since 1944, that the Grey Dawn's mission had gone wrong, catastrophically wrong, and that someone had ordered her destruction to keep whatever she discovered from falling into enemy hands. During wartime, such drastic actions were not unheard of. Allied submarines had standing orders to destroy code materials and sink compromised vessels to prevent intelligence capture. Could the Grey Dawn have uncovered something, perhaps a secret Japanese base, or an Allied intelligence operation gone awry, that necessitated her erasure? Naval records from 1952 show that the U.S. Navy quietly reclassified the case file for PC 1219 as Operational Intelligence, closed. No press release was issued. No families were notified of the recovered fragments. It was as though the Navy preferred the story to remain untold. Only decades later, through Freedom of Information Act requests, did researchers learn that the decision to keep the file closed came directly from Naval Operations Command in Washington, D.C., citing sensitive intelligence implications. Among historians, debate continues over what exactly those implications were. One theory links the Grey Dawn's disappearance to Operation Causeway, an early planning phase for the eventual invasion of Formosa, Taiwan. Intelligence collection in early 1944 focused heavily on identifying Japanese fuel lines that could sustain resistance during that operation. The timing and region fit almost perfectly. If the Grey Dawn stumbled upon a convoy or depot tied to these preparations, her discovery could have intersected with one of the most classified intelligence efforts of the Pacific Campaign. But another theory suggests something simpler and darker. Some naval officers believed that the Grey Dawn's patrol may have been mistaken for a Japanese craft by Allied aircraft operating without updated recognition charts. Friendly fire incidents, though rarely acknowledged, were far from uncommon. If a U.S. bomber mistook the Grey Dawn for an enemy gunboat during a night patrol and destroyed her, the secrecy that followed might have been an attempt to conceal the error. No such incident was ever admitted. Even now, the contradictions remain. The hull fragments show deliberate detonation, not aerial bombardment. Yet the official record never mentions scuttling orders. If the crew survived long enough to sink their own ship, where did they go? No life rafts were ever recovered. No radio calls for help. Only silence. A single marginal note in a declassified file from 1953 sums up the enduring enigma: mission completed. Vessel lost. Nature of discovery classified. Those 6 words suggest that the Grey Dawn may have succeeded, that she found what she was looking for, and vanished because of it. The discovery near Kolombangara, rather than solving the case, only deepened its shadows. The Pacific had surrendered a clue, and with it, a chilling question. If the Grey Dawn was deliberately scuttled, what secret was she carrying that required her to disappear completely? And somewhere, beneath 80 miles of restless sea, that answer still lies, waiting. By 1951, 7 years after the USS Grey Dawn had vanished into the Pacific, the war was over, but her story refused to rest. It was a group of local fishermen from Kolombangara who first brought the mystery back to life. Their nets, heavy with coral and shell, dragged up twisted pieces of metal that gleamed faintly beneath the ocean sun. At first, they assumed it was just another wreck from the war, one of dozens that littered the Solomon seabed. But a closer look revealed the unmistakable imprint of a hull number, PC 1219. The Grey Dawn had finally been found, or rather, fragments of her had. The Royal New Zealand Navy's salvage divers were the first to inspect the find. What they discovered raised more questions than it answered. The pieces were from the midsection of a U.S. patrol craft, and the metal was bent inward, not outward, suggesting internal detonation. These weren't the chaotic fractures of battle damage or a torpedo strike. They were precise, methodical, like the result of scuttling charges set by the crew themselves. Yet no log, no record, no communication had ever suggested such an order. When word of the discovery reached the U.S. Navy's Pacific Archives office in Pearl Harbor, a small team of investigators was quietly dispatched. Among them was Commander Walter Riggs, a veteran intelligence officer who had served under Admiral Halsey. His written report, later declassified, paints a picture of quiet unease. Recovered fragments indicate deliberate hull breach from within. No evidence of munitions impact or external ordnance penetration. Cause of destruction remains undetermined. Crew status unknown. His last line was underlined twice. Recommend continued classification. The theory of deliberate scuttling opened a chilling set of possibilities. Under wartime protocols, a vessel could only be intentionally sunk under 3 circumstances: catastrophic damage beyond repair, imminent capture by the enemy, or explicit orders to destroy evidence of classified activity. Yet, if the Grey Dawn had indeed been part of a reconnaissance mission, none of those scenarios fit neatly. No known Japanese fleet was operating in the region after mid-February 1944. And if she'd been disabled, distress signals would have been sent before any decision to scuttle. So why did the crew sink their own ship, and where did they go? Modern researchers, examining the recovered hull fragments decades later, noted another anomaly: traces of thermite residue. Thermite was not a standard demolition material for small U.S. naval craft. It was, however, used by certain naval intelligence units and cryptologic teams to destroy sensitive equipment, especially encryption machines. This revelation hinted that the Grey Dawn may have been carrying code-breaking materials, or conducting covert intelligence gathering far beyond her official scope. If so, her mission was not a patrol, it was espionage. A classified field note from Naval Intelligence Command, dated March 1944 but released only in 1989, appears to support that theory. It refers to a PC-class patrol assigned to intercept enemy comms from concealed listening point off Bougainville, exactly where the Grey Dawn's final course was traced. It's possible the ship's true purpose was not to engage enemy vessels at all, but to monitor radio frequencies and decode Japanese naval transmissions, a dangerous job that placed them deep behind enemy waters. If they were discovered, standard procedure would have been to destroy all evidence and ensure capture was impossible. Scuttling the ship would have been their only option. Still, this theory leaves haunting questions. If the ship was scuttled, the crew should have taken to rafts or islands. No life raft, no survivor, and no Japanese record of prisoners of war matching their names has ever been found. It was as if 12 men simply disappeared into the ocean. Lieutenant Commander Delaney's personal logbook, if it survived the sinking, has never been recovered. But one entry, recorded days before departure and preserved in a copy sent to his wife, reads eerily in retrospect: "If we don't report back, it will be because we found something too big to return from." In 1954, An internal Navy memorandum revisited the case after renewed public interest in missing World War II ships. The memo's conclusion was chillingly blunt: wreckage consistent with self-destruction. Further inquiry inadvisable. Case to remain closed. The Grey Dawn's final report was sealed once again under the justification of national security, and the recovered metal fragments were quietly stored at a naval facility in Pearl Harbor, where they remain to this day, under restricted access. But in 1978, divers exploring a nearby trench west of Kolombangara discovered something else: a small, heavily corroded artifact identified as part of an early U.S. Navy Mark II radio transmitter. The serial number matched equipment used on patrol-class vessels. The artifact was found nearly 15 miles from where the hull fragments were recovered. It raised a disturbing possibility that the Grey Dawn's remains were scattered across two separate sites, suggesting the ship had been moved or destroyed in stages. If deliberate scuttling occurred, the question becomes why there, and by whose command. The region west of Kolombangara had been charted by Allied intelligence as a potential Japanese supply point, possibly harboring hidden fuel barges. Was the Grey Dawn ambushed there? Did her crew, realizing capture was imminent, choose to destroy their own vessel rather than reveal what they'd uncovered? No matter which theory you follow, friendly fire, sabotage, espionage, or internal cover-up, each leads to the same grim conclusion. Whatever happened aboard the Grey Dawn was not an accident. The discovery of her fragments only confirmed that she had been silenced intentionally. Today, those recovered plates, warped by controlled explosions and time, rest in a sealed naval archive. They are cold, mute witnesses to a story that remains unresolved, a ghost of steel and salt water. And as experts still debate her fate, one truth endures: the men of the USS Grey Dawn went to sea on a mission so secret that, even in death, it refused to surface. The official record closes with a single sentence: USS PC, 1219, missing, presumed lost. But for those who have studied her story, that phrase is a door, not an ending. The mystery of the USS Grey Dawn endures as one of the most haunting disappearances of the Pacific War, a case that refuses to be silenced, no matter how many years pass or how many files are stamped, classified. In the decades after the fragments were found, historians and naval investigators kept circling back to the same questions. Why did a 12-man patrol vanish in calm seas? Why were their records erased, their missions sealed, and their traces deliberately concealed? Each time researchers peeled back another layer, they found hints of something larger: an intelligence operation that blurred the line between reconnaissance and covert action. By the 1960s, as more wartime records were unsealed, the Grey Dawn's name began to appear in obscure Navy memoranda related to special intelligence assignments, South Pacific area. A 1964 Navy intelligence summary listed her as one of 3 vessels lost during classified monitoring operations. The other 2 were confirmed to have been used in clandestine signal interception programs. That connection reignited speculation. Was the Grey Dawn part of a code-breaking effort meant to intercept Japanese communications ahead of the Philippines campaign? If so, she was operating in the deadliest stretch of ocean for Allied vessels, with no support and no rescue plan. Lieutenant Commander Delaney, whose name appears briefly in these documents, was described as cleared for intelligence liaison operations. That designation was rare, and reserved only for officers attached to naval intelligence or working under joint British-American cryptologic directives. In other words, Delaney may not have been on a standard patrol at all. His orders could have come directly from Washington. What makes this possibility even more compelling is a single, overlooked line in an Allied intercept report declassified in 1983. Unidentified American craft reported shadowing convoy, February 18, 1944. Subsequent silence. Japanese records ceased transmissions from area within hours. The Japanese ceased broadcasting entirely in that region after the Grey Dawn's disappearance, a silence that lasted 3 days. For cryptologists, that pattern was no coincidence. It suggested the ship may have succeeded in intercepting sensitive transmissions before she vanished, transmissions that could have compromised a hidden enemy supply route. If true, the patrol accomplished its mission, but paid the ultimate price for it. The mystery continued to evolve as technology advanced. In the early 2000s, Maritime archaeologists using side-scan sonar attempted to locate the wreck. Several anomalies were detected west of Kolombangara, but strong currents and poor visibility prevented confirmation. One sonar return, roughly matching the dimensions of a PC-class patrol boat, lies at a depth of 190 meters, far deeper than the shallow reefs where her fragments were recovered. It raises an unsettling question. If part of the ship lies at such depth, how did the hull pieces end up closer to shore? Could the vessel have been towed, or deliberately relocated after the war? The Pacific remains quiet on that answer. But survivors from other patrol units stationed at Tulagi in 1944 have added a human layer to the story. In oral histories recorded in the 1980s, several veterans recalled overhearing their superiors discussing a compromised mission and immediate asset disposal. One former radar technician remembered an officer remarking, "Better lost than captured." He didn't understand what it meant at the time, but decades later, that phrase echoes eerily against what is now known about the Grey Dawn's final hours. For the families, closure never came. Lieutenant Commander Delaney's wife never remarried. She spent her final years corresponding with naval historians, providing letters and photographs of her husband and crew in the hope that someone might remember them. "I don't need to know where they are," she wrote in 1969, "only that their silence meant something." Her words embody the quiet dignity of families whose loved ones were lost not to fate, but to secrecy. Today, the case of the Grey Dawn is studied in naval academies as a lesson in the hidden costs of wartime intelligence. It reminds cadets that history is not always written in after-action reports. Sometimes, it's buried beneath the waves, sealed under orders that outlive those who gave them. Each new generation of researchers, divers, and historians tries to piece together what little remains. A few sheets of redacted paper, corroded metal fragments, a handful of coded messages. Together, they form the outline of a truth that remains just beyond reach. No supernatural force claimed the Grey Dawn. No legend of curses or ghosts explains her vanishing. What took her was far colder: the machinery of war, secrecy, and duty. A mission so confidential that even its success required silence. Somewhere off Kolombangara, 12 men followed orders they could not question, discovered something they could not reveal, and disappeared to protect it. As the waves roll endlessly across the Solomon Sea, the coordinates of her final resting place remain unknown. Divers still search, historians still debate. But the Pacific keeps its secrets well, and perhaps that is fitting. Because in the story of the Grey Dawn, silence was not just the end, it was the mission. The secret U.S. Navy patrol that never reported back remains a haunting testament to the price of intelligence, loyalty, and the kind of truth that history will always chase but never quite catch.